Good. I don't know why I was having a hard time. I finally was able to get in through the calendar on Teams.
Okay, yeah, we're offline right now, so I just wanted to make sure that before you guys all talked about stuff online. So it's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Amy. So we're doing
Good, thank you. I've been having lots of technical issues.
I know we've had some issues, and so I just wanted to give a few more minutes for the staff to help you all get on and make sure that everybody can be seen and heard.
So Charlene is planning to be about a half hour late, and Lopez is not able to attend. So, and I just talked to John Irvin, and he was working to get on. And I'm going to Amy and Chad.
I've been on.
All right, you're on.
Amy and Chad.
Hey, John.
Hey.
Okay.
Chad. Yeah.
So I think we could start. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, it's telling me no available camera found though.
All right. I hear somebody has.
It's Chad. Chad, is someone knocking at your door?
Yes.
Sarah, do you want us to start now anyway? I'm good if you are.
I'm good if you are. We're just going to ask Chad to. Yep, perfect. All
okay,
right.
So they're going to stop the timer and we're just going to start. Okay?
Yep.
All right. All right, let me know when we're ready, guys. All right, welcome back. We are going to start. We got everybody on, and so I'm pleased our staff was able to work through that and get it completed before the 8 minutes that I had set the timer for. So I will start again. Welcome again to the Modesto City Schools special board meeting of October 12th, 2020. And I thank you for joining us for this meeting tonight. And I will go through the roll call. So we have Trustee Brown is here. I see him.
I'm here.
All right. Trustee Irvin.
Here.
I know you said your video was not working.
No,
Trustee Lopez is not here. He's going to be absent tonight. Trustee Newman. I see Trustee Newman. She's here. And then Vice President West is expected to be late and joining us, I believe, around 6 o'clock. And I am President Marks. So welcome for those of you who are able to watch us online. And now for our translator services, I just like to refer anybody who needs translator services to Ms. Paula Valbuena, who is on this virtual conference. Ms. Valbuena, will you please go ahead?
Thank you, President Marks. Buenas tardes, habla Paula Valbuena. Si necesita servicios de interpretación al español, por favor llame al 805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 868-137106 seguido de la tecla numeral. Este es un número totalmente gratis. Nuevamente llame al número de teléfono 805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 868-137106 seguido de la tecla numeral. También puede acceder a estas instrucciones en nuestro sitio web mcs4kids.com dirigiéndose a la parte inferior de la pantalla en Quick Links y haciendo Click and Board Agendas para ir a la agenda de esta noche. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Valbuena. And now, good evening again. This is the open session meeting of the Board of Trustees, and it's being live streamed at the direction of the board. The live stream is available on the district's website, and the recordings will be available for viewing the day after the board meeting. Modesto City School board meetings are closed to the public currently to follow state guidelines on social distancing until further notice. This action was taken in response to the governor's executive order N2520 and resolution 19/20-17 delegating authority to take necessary action to protect students and staff from the spread of the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, adopted by Modesto City Schools on March 18th, 2020. Regarding public comment, Modesto City Schools has provided an opportunity for the public to provide comment. It's outlined on the agenda. The public has been given an opportunity to call in and leave a voicemail or send us a comment via an email address. This practice will continue throughout the time we are conducting virtual meetings. For members of the public that are interested in commenting in the future, we welcome your comments. And now, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So we will rise as best we can where we are, and I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. And before we get started, Ms. Noonan, are there any general comments from the public?
Yes, we have one this evening.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and read it. It's from Mr. Ross Jackson, and the title of it is A Missed Opportunity. Dear members of the school board and residents of Modesto, my name is Ross Jackson. I am a taxpayer in the Modesto City Schools area and am writing this today regarding my experience with the Modesto City School Board and what I consider a missed opportunity. I reached out to the Modesto City School Board at a recent meeting with an opportunity for the district to partner with the City of Modesto and residents to help provide safe and affordable housing for the people that live in their district. This is a housing program that could help local families to build housing and provide more tax revenue for the school district in the future. Although I did receive a response from the Assistant Superintendent of Schools, it was explained to me that the next step was to hear from the school board on the matter. I must say that I was disappointed that not one member of the school board showed any interest in even hearing about the program. I have always supported my school district and have been happy to support tax measures that helped support the district with the needed funding that it sought from me as a taxpayer. I would point to this experience when considering future any partnership from the taxpayers. I ask that we remember that when the school district had an opportunity to help support a program of value to them, not only was there no support offered, there wasn't even the time or courtesy of consideration given to hear about the issue. Thank you, Ross Jackson. And that's the only general comment that we received.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Noonan. And I understand there's a few more comments to be read at a different time in the board meeting.
Correct.
Yes, on a different item. Okay, thank you for, even though we didn't have general comment time, but we allowed for that comment to be read into the record. So thank you for that. And I will move on to item B1, the Board of Education Budget Workshop. And I'm turning this over to Mr. Zierle.
Thank you, President Marks. Good evening, trustees. Let me just get a minute to share my screen with you.
Okay.
Okay, should be visible for all. I am Tim Zierle, Associate Superintendent for Business Services, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the board about our budget. And while this topic may not be what we had originally planned when we calendared a fall board workshop, we still have plenty to discuss and share with the board and update the board. And we will do that with the state COVID-19 recession. We'll give you most recent updates on the state economy that we have received. We'll update the board on the work to date of the Budget Advisory Committee and our district response to the COVID recession. What are we currently doing and what do we plan on doing? Cash deferrals, I know we talked about those when the state adopted their budget, when we adopted our budget, and we'll talk about our options that we see around cash deferrals for the district. We'll talk about our ending fund balance and a multi-year projection. Just want to begin with just a little cartoon, this is from a prior workshop a couple years ago. That's supposed to be Ron Bennett of School Services, who's no longer with us. But this really makes sense right now. And just to read it, it's sometimes your first long-term goal is to survive the short term. And that is more apparent now than ever. We like to talk about long-term goals and long-term plannings, but what we see going on around us, what is impacting us, our first goal is to survive the short term. So when we look at the state and district budget assumptions, just kind of a review, the state built their budget back in the summer, assuming a 20% decrease in overall tax collections for the 2020-21 fiscal year. This was based on expected unemployment and a decline in the S&P 500 index. At that point in time, any decrease at any point in time, any decrease in the state general fund revenues directly impacts our school funding and all of school funding for California, because education is appropriated approximately 38.5 cents of every general fund dollar. This is due to Proposition 98, and we are constitutionally entitled to a certain percentage of the general fund. Currently, there are no discussions that we know of currently planned for state mid-year budget reductions. We had mentioned this was a possibility when we adopted our budget, when we did a 45-day revision once the state adopted their budget. Again, due to the uncertainties that were coming, we expected, and many of our consultants expected, another mid-year budget reduction. And I'm proud to say there aren't any current plans for the district to borrow cash for this year. So why are now it's a little different than the assumptions? Were the assumptions from the state overly conservative? As of August, the state had 11.4% unemployment rate. That was better than expected. And the S&P 500 index reached an all-time high of 3,580 on September 2nd, 2020. Tax revenues through August for the months of July and August, the first 2 months of the fiscal year, are ahead of estimates by $4.6 billion at the state level. Why is this? It's possible that the tax policies, you hear this a lot from California, that the 1% of Californians pay the majority of the tax. And that fact may actually provide a cushion from a COVID-19 recession, which is different than prior recessions, because the S&P 500 is doing better than expected. So the high income earners for the state of California may or may not be shielded so far from the COVID-19 recession. And if that continues, that will project well for 2021-22 projections as compared to what was projected for this fiscal year. However, even with the better tax revenues, there is still a $6.2 billion shortfall projected for next year, 21-22, and we are still facing $11 billion in deferral. Those are not going away anytime soon. So we have engaged the Budget Advisory Committee. We did this last year, and now their work continues into this year. We have met 3 times already, June 3rd, August 11th, and September 8th. And then you can see 5 more meetings that are scheduled, one of which is tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, we will meet again as a Budget Advisory Committee. We'll go over this presentation with them as well, and we'll talk through other areas for potential budget reductions. The committee has discussed and will continue to discuss current budget and areas to reduce. The goal here is to continue to build trust and transparency with our stakeholders. This Budget Advisory Committee is made up of multiple stakeholders with the district. There's labor partners, there's administration, there's board members. So we want to continue building trust and transparency with our budget as we work through the current recession that we're in. Items that are under consideration from the Budget Advisory Committee is energy conservation. We are currently implementing that. I'm proud to say that through the direction of the board, we are in an energy conservation program, and we are implementing that this year. Transportation services were discussed from the Budget Advisory Committee, both general education and special education. And again, we are doing this. We've had a review done of the department, and we will be bringing forward changes to the transportation department to be more efficient in providing the services that we provide. Computer replacement, early retirement incentive. This came up in the Budget Advisory Committee, and we are investigating that. So we are starting the process to see if we would be a good partner with our labor groups for an early retirement incentive for this coming year. Legal fees, this one comes up a lot, and it does come up in the Budget Advisory Committee as a way to reduce our costs. And I'm pleased to say that we did actually reduce our costs for legal fees beginning last year. And then supplies and services. This is kind of a catch-all area for our budget. There are big numbers in there, and so the committee wants to look at our costs for these areas and see what can we reduce if we need to. So what have we done as a district so far? For the COVID-19 recession, we did, beginning in March, implement a district-wide spending freeze. With the exception for what you see on the screen below, these areas are not part of the spending freeze. Any distance learning expenditure, Modesto Virtual Academy or direct student instruction, teacher classroom supplies, technology-related items, nutrition services, IEP mandated requirements, and the maintenance and operations. Those areas of the district were not subject to the spending freeze. We are also currently reviewing all of our vacant positions before they're advertised. So we sit down, we review them. Is it something we want to continue with? We don't want to be in a position where we are hiring people and then potentially have to do layoff notices later on. So we're reviewing every position we have before advertising and posting to fill. Last year, for the end of 1920, the period of March through June, we did have some operational savings because we were not in school for the most part. $2.3 million from our unrestricted base and $15.7 million of supplemental concentration dollars went unspent. So $18 million we were able to recapture. You'll see that when we talk about our ending fund balance for the end of last school year because we did not get to proceed with planned expenditures for the district. What else have we done for this year? We've frozen department requests for budget increases. So every year, beginning in the spring, departments are allowed to put forward requests to increase their budgets, whether it's for personnel costs or it's for other department-related expenditures. We froze all of those this year. So they came in, they were submitted as part of our normal process, but Cabinet decided we're going to freeze those. We're not going to move forward. Again, we did not want to start a program, put dollars into a program, and then 6 or 8 months later have to cut that program and pull those dollars back. What else are we doing? We're utilizing our federal CARES dollars for expenditures. The biggest one so far is one-to-one devices. 31,000, more than 31,000 new devices have been purchased or will be purchased with our federal CARES dollars. That frees up our general fund for those planned expenditures. We've also been able to pay off existing one-to-one device leases with our federal CARES dollars. We've added additional learning software for distance learning, increased our professional development. We are looking to add to our bus fleet for decreased student capacities. You're taking a 60, 70 passenger bus, and now with social distancing, we're looking at anywhere between 22 and 26 students. So if we're going to transport students, we're possibly going to need to have more resources in our fleet to transport students in a smaller capacity. Student desks, we are adding student desks across the district for when our students do come back. Cleaning and disinfecting supplies. And then this came out of the Budget Advisory Committee. possibly use of CARES funds is opportunity for students while on distance learning to achieve. So those are some items. There's a lot more than this, but just to highlight our response using our CARES dollars to the COVID recession. Just want to throw this up there. I showed you this, I believe, a couple board meetings ago when we talked about our 45-day budget revision. And this just shows the cash deferrals. This is what the state is doing. A previous slide, I said there's $11 billion in cash deferrals. And so what that means is we do not receive the cash when we anticipate receiving it. That would be in the month on the left. It's moved across the line into the next fiscal year. And so these are, we do end up receiving our dollars. We just don't receive them in the period of which they've been earned and are due to us. It creates a cash flow situation potentially for us. And we'll talk more about that in a minute and why we are not borrowing to because of what you see in front of you. And again, this is this slide you saw before, and it just shows that about 70%, we will only receive about 70% of our state aid during the fiscal year. 30% will be deferred into the next fiscal year. So looking at our ending fund balance, going back to 14-15, you'll see the trend. There's some years it goes up, some years it goes down. There's you probably can look at 2016-17 right away and see, okay, what happened in 16-17 and then 17-18, the ending fund balance was decreased by about the same amount. If you recall, for the board members that were here in 16-17, that negotiation year went unsettled. And so we finished the year without having a settlement with our bargaining units. So we never paid out the settlement, so our ending fund balance grew. And then 17-18, you see it decreases because 17-18 not only had the settlement for that year, we had to account for the settlement from 2016-17. So our ending fund balance went up and it came right down the next year. 2019-20, that's the year we just completed. Again, we did not complete negotiations during that fiscal year, plus the aforementioned $18 million or so that I talked about operational savings from not being in school for the last 3 months of the year. Our fund balance increased by the looks of this dramatically from one year to the next. However, 2021, we do have negotiated settlements in 2021 for 19-20 for our Modesto Teachers Association and our management group. Those are already in there, so that they're coming out of the 2021 year. And so you can see the impact of when our fund balance grows and then the impact on the future years. 21-22 and 22-23 is our current multi-year projection that we have. This will be updated and revised for our first interim reporting period, which will come to you in December, because at this point in time, we do not, even though we haven't been in school the first 2 months of the year, 2.5 months, we have not assumed any budgetary savings like what we saw in 19-20. We'll need to calculate that and put that into our multi-year projection for the current year once we do our first interim budget update. So what this shows you is the trend line going forward. On the recession, we are not projecting any new revenue from the state of California, meaning there's zero COLA in our, not only our current year of 2021, but 21-22 and 22-23. And so this is going to be a challenge. This is why we have the Budget Advisory Committee working on this. However, we still maintain a positive balance in the third year out. And so we are in a pretty good situation. Breaking down our ending fund balance a little bit more, this goes into just a little more detail for you. And you can see the different areas. 19-20, we ended up with over $100 million in our ending fund balance. That would be restricted and unrestricted. But what this shows you is we don't have $100 million of which we could just allocate today. So starting at the top, We do set aside about $1.5 million. That's called non-spendable dollars. That would be for inventory. That's prepaid expenditures. That's our revolving cash account. So then we have $30.5 million of assignments. The bulk of this is our unspent supplemental concentration grant funding from the LCAP. So what we do with it is we assign it into an account line. We didn't spend it, so we want to show we didn't spend our LCAP dollars. That's why if you look at that green piece and go back a couple of years, it was only $9.5 million a couple of years ago. We started beginning in 18-19 when we closed the books. We began to identify our unspent supplemental concentration grant funds, and we put it in an assignment line in our ending fund balance until we asked the board to approve authorizing spending those dollars. Economic uncertainties is just shy of $24 million. And you'll notice that's double from the $12 million in 18-19. Again, we asked the board, we're not comfortable with the 3% reserve, which is a requirement for a district our size. So for fiscal health, we asked the board to consider doubling that, a 6% reserve for economic uncertainties, which we were able to do in 2019-20. So we have $24 million instead of the required about $12 million. Cut that in half, that would be 3%. And then we have our restricted accounts, and then finally our unassigned balances at the bottom. So when we closed the books last year, we were, like I said, we were above $100 million in our ending fund balance, and we have a roughly $37 million of that is unassigned. And you can see how that goes down for the current year and then the 2 years of the multi-year projection. Keep in mind, these are projections that are going to change. They're going to change come January when the governor releases his proposal for 21-22. And then also, as I mentioned, we currently are we're currently not in in-person student learning. So there will be a significant level of operational savings this year, even for the first 3 months of the year, once we calculate it and reflect that in our projections for the ending fund balance. One more thing, as I mentioned, we do not plan to borrow money for the cash deferrals for this year. And you can see, because of the health of the 2019-20 column, we have enough in our reserves to withstand 30% of our funds being deferred to the next year. We still have enough cash to meet our financial obligations, of which the most important is paying our employees on a monthly basis. And so currently, at least for 2020-21, we're not going to have to engage in borrowing cash to meet our financial obligations, which is a very good thing. It's very exciting compared to some of my colleagues that are struggling with this throughout the state. That's a brief, kind of a brief overview of our budget. As I mentioned, when we saw this on the calendar in a fall workshop, we thought we may be talking about mid-year reductions from the state. I'm pleased to say we're not at this point in time. We have not seen any discussion of that. But again, I do appreciate the opportunity just to kind of talk through our budget, some issues we're dealing with, so the board can be informed. And with that, I will take any questions that you may have.
Okay, so we're back, ready to hear some questions from board members. All right, so it looks like I have Trustee Newman has a question. So Trustee Newman and then Trustee Brown.
There we
There we
go.
go. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Alright. Okay, so all right, good news on some of the savings dollars that you indicated in our regular expenditures. What percentage did our legal fees decrease?
I'll look that up for you and get that. Before this is over, I'll call up that spreadsheet and get you that. I don't have it at my fingertips at the moment.
And I just want to say kudos to staff, because that's really just basic, making sure that we use those legal, our lawyers' time efficiently. And that means, running it through the superintendent, running it up the chain of command, and that's how we do that. So that means it's everybody on at district has worked on that. So I appreciate that.
And that was at the leadership of Dr. Noguchi. I mean, that was a
Yes.
planned reduction, working with the board. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, no, that's a conscious effort, and I just wanted to point that out and acknowledge that. All right. Okay, the CARES dollars. There was some indication when we got the CARES dollars that they had a time limit. Is that time limit still applicable?
It is. For the majority of our CARES dollars, about $30 million is December 30th. That is the sunset. What still I think we're trying to work through is that spent or is it obligated? Because there's two different things. And we haven't got a firm answer on that. If it's obligated by December 30th, it gives us a little more flexibility than actually having to have either the services provided or the equipment purchase here by that point in time. So, but December 30th is still there.
So we're looking for guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. Who's going to give us that guidance?
The California Department of Education. That would
CDE.
be.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then you went over something kind of quickly, and being that I'm going to be not going to be on the board too much longer, I think it's important to talk about deferrals. That means when the state says, oh, we owe you all this money to educate these students, but hey, we'll only pay you at the height of the recession. I think it was like 45 cents on the dollar in the Great Recession. And so I want to make sure I heard you correctly. We have cash reserves ready to withstand 30% deferrals. So like 30 cents on the dollar if they did that. Is that what you said?
That's what I said. For the remainder of this year, so through June of 21, we're confident that we have enough cash on hand to withstand only receiving 68% of our cash for the year.
That's great. That is as we move into uncertain times, that's really important. The state can issue, basically, it's in big giant IOU, and it took them years to pay it back. And so during that time, we were living on these reserves and basically making sure we could make payroll and keeping the doors open on those reserves that we had. So it's really important to pay attention to how long we can survive deferrals. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's it. Thank you.
And to answer your question about legal fees, I'm sorry I didn't have it ready.
That's okay.
We spent 13% less in 1920 than we spent in 1819. So it was 13.3% was decrease in legal fees.
And then if memory serves me, it's about 800,000. So 13% less of 800,000.
It was 800,000 last year. So before it was in the 940 range for the prior year.
Okay, good. I knew I was about in that range. Okay, great. Well, we're doing better than other public entities around. I urge the public to pay attention to that. Right. So good job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Newman, Trustee Newman. I have Trustee Brown and then Trustee Irvin. Go ahead, Trustee Brown.
Yes, I too want to thank the district for some foresight and planning that allowed us to be in a strong reserve position. And I just want to reiterate, and I think you've already answered this, Mr. Zerly, the fund balances that you showed and that is a cash true balance. It's not anticipating any deferral funds.
That's a good point. It is a cash true balance. Now that could change. I think as Trustee Newman pointed out from past recessions where we had to close our books and put what we call receivables, meaning we're due the money. But right now it is a cash true balance. We're fortunate, yes.
Okay, and question about deferrals. I have lived through several periods of deferrals, so I understand how they work, but has there been any history when the deferrals have not met the promised deadlines?
If I understand your question, no, the state of California has followed through on if they deferred it from June of one year to August of the next year, they followed through that August with the deferrals. I don't recall any situations where that deferral kept getting pushed out, or we didn't receive what the state was constitutionally obligated to provide us, if I understood your question right.
That's my question. I just wanted to know if there was any history that could frighten us based on further deferral of a deferral.
No, not at this point. What they would do in that case is they would put in what you probably heard to as a deficit before, meaning they're only going to give us, they're not going to defer it. They're going to cut us. They're only going to give us 80 cents on the dollar. And then they could defer some of that. So at the moment, we're not hearing any discussions of that. Hopefully, as I said on one of the slides, the state's economy may be a little more insulated from this recession versus the last recession that hit the housing market, hit the stock market. Maybe we're a little more insulated at the state level during this COVID recession, as long as the stock market continues to carry those high wage earners.
Well, we can wear out our knees hoping and praying that we don't go any deeper than we are right now.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Brown. On to Trustee Irvin. Trustee Irvin?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
On mute. Yes. My question. One of my questions is around like what Trustee Newman was talking about in terms of the. I know Mr. Zerley, you called it obligated funds. Is that the same as encumbered?
That is correct. Same terminology.
Okay, same terminology. So trying to see if those funds are encumbered before December 30th, if we can still count as being used.
Yeah, with the supply chain the way it is across the country, I mean, there's some things that we just don't know if we can receive by December 30th, as odd as that sounds. So it would be much more helpful if we could encumber it, but that remains to be seen.
Okay, cool. And I also want to extend my appreciation for the work that was done on this presentation and the numbers and just the foresight and all of the work that went into, dealing with this uncertainty as far as economic stability is concerned. Like Trustee Newman said, I know other districts are not in as good of light that we are, so that's a blessing for us, to the dedication of our staff and the professionalism and all of that good stuff. And then my last question was in the dollars where the fund balance as it was getting lower going into the other years, that the reserve, that 6% maintains, right, as well?
Except for the multicolored
Yes.
chart that had the components of our ending fund balance. If we continue with the state not giving us any increases while our cost increases go up, we would have to decrease in 22-23 the 6% to 3% to maintain a positive certification. Now,
Okay,
that is as of right now. As I mentioned, we haven't given any estimates for any dollar savings yet for this year. So, right. I mean, that could change very easily in a couple of months when we do first interim. But for what you saw tonight, that 6% has been reduced to the required 3% in 22-23.
Okay, I was just making sure my math was on par with that. And I saw that.
You caught that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Irvin. And so is part of the reason that we are in better shape than some other districts, is it because we put in the 6% into savings for economic uncertainty instead of the 3% when the state said they wanted us to do the 3%?
That is one reason, yes. I
Okay.
mean, just to double that gives us a little bit of cushion that other districts that maintain the minimum requirement just do not have at this point in time.
Yeah, because that's $12 million that we wouldn't have this year if we had reduced it down to 3%.
Potentially, yes.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
right.
It would be somewhere else.
Right, it would be, yes, that's right. So that's good. So I'm glad we did that. So it does help us get through next year without borrowing and without paying that extra interest during this time of deferrals. I know the state, as a past president of CSBA, that was a big item when we were lobbying our legislators and asking board members around the state to allow us to not stay at that lowest minimum, because we carried the state last time we went through a recession. The school districts did, because they borrowed money from us to get us through. So anyway, and to keep their rating up, at least to where we didn't go completely bankrupt as a state. So that was a pretty big issue back then. So recalling that, I'm grateful that we have done that this year, though I know for the 22-23 year, at this point, looks like we're going to have to go down to the minimum unless things change in a positive way. So that's good. I don't see any other questions from board members, and now I'll ask Ms. Noonan if there are any questions or comments from the public.
No, we did not have comments on this item.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I didn't think we did, but I just wanted to ask and ensure that.
I would
Okay.
be, if I may, I would be
Pardon?
remiss if I did not point out that I talked earlier on one of the slides about our transparency with our stakeholders, and the Modesto Teachers Association for negotiations agreed to a one-time salary settlement. And so that helped those out years 21, 22, and 22, 23, because that cost did not extend out into those out years. So I just need to say the partnership that we had with the Modesto Teachers Association does allow our any fund balance to be preserved longer than it would have been.
Yes. And we are very grateful for that negotiation and to be able to do that. So I am pleased that that has been worked out also this time of the year, and that we were able to come to agreement on that. So we appreciate everybody's sacrifices at this time as we're trying to make it through these uncertain times. And now we are going to move on to item C1, discussion of TK through 6 draft Safe Schools Reopening Plan. So Ms. Noonan.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Godot is going to present the PowerPoint from his computer. So thank you, Mr. Godot. And good evening, Board President Marks, as well as the other trustees and cabinet and members of the public who are watching. We're happy to welcome you to this board workshop so that we can talk about the draft plan to safely reopen our TK through 6 schools. So the process tonight, we're going to go through, and this format looks a little different because this is what we did for the community forum. So we wanted to, the community forums that we had on October 1st and October 5th. So we wanted to keep the format the same since it's all connected. So tonight we'll be going through, some of it will be duplicative information, but we want to make sure the board is exposed to that information as well. So we'll talk about the timing and the process for safely reopening schools. We'll give you a broad overview of the reopening, the draft reopening plan that, like I said, covers TK through 6. It also includes preschool as well. We will review survey feedback. We've broken it down for both the feedback we've received from parents as well as staff. We will review the timeline and next steps, and then we welcome the board trustees' feedback and any questions that you have. So first off, next slide, we'll talk about the district goal alignment. So this really aligns with goals 1 and goal 3, which is about academic achievement, obviously, and then providing a safe, welcoming environment for our students, staff, and families. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Noguchi so that she can walk you through some of the different requirements where we are right now in the county, and she'll give you more of an overview, and then I'll take over when she's done with her slides. So Dr. Noguchi.
Thank you. I actually just have 2 slides, and I want to be able to try to explain really where we are as a county as it relates to the tiered system, which is going to be the second slide. So originally this board presentation, we were bringing forward a waiver proposal. At this time, we are not bringing a waiver proposal because it is anticipated that we will be in the red tier tomorrow. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. So in order for elementary TK6 to reopen, if we are in the purple zone, then we need to apply for a waiver. This waiver would need to be approved by county public health and then also the state public health. In addition to the waiver, we need to make sure that we engage all of our stakeholders, which we've engaged multiple stakeholders as we've worked to develop this plan, recognizing there's still a lot more input still to gain from stakeholders. So currently, right now, as of today, we are in the purple, the widespread risk. That is the highest level that you can be in. That is where you would apply for a waiver for your TK6. However, it is anticipated that tomorrow, it was actually, we thought we were going to have it last week, but we're pretty assured that we're going to get to the red tier tomorrow. Once in the red tier, if we remain there consecutively for 14 days straight, then we're able to begin to open our secondary schools. So at this time, we are bringing forward an elementary TK6 plan. However, we are also simultaneously looking at a plan for our secondary because we know that if we stay in the red for 14 days, then it's not too far off. And I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Noonan.
Great, thank you. Next slide, Mr. Godot. So I just wanted to reiterate, we still have the plan posted on the website. It's linked right from the homepage if you look for the icon of the school bus. And then you'll see the draft plan. It's available both in English and Spanish. And there was also a survey that was available for staff and parents to complete, and that was open from September 29th through October 7th. So I'll be presenting that data later on in tonight's presentation. The next slide goes over exactly how we publicized the reopening plan as well as the survey. You know, this is a massive effort. It has taken a lot of hours and staff work, and we definitely appreciate the input that we received both from staff as well as families in English and Spanish. So I just want to thank everyone who weighed in and provided their feedback. So we promoted it extensively on social media. We also did our school messenger, voice, email, and text to both families and to district staff. We did Deke Faro in the Modesto B. He covered the waiver and the process that we were going through if we had been pursuing a waiver, but the process for reopening. So we appreciate Deke's work on that. We also decided to do additional outreach to the Spanish-speaking families. So we did it's called a flight of 30-second ads on 2 stations. I believe they're called La Suavecita and La Favorita. So we did about a week's worth of advertising to push to the website. We also did outreach to various community groups, including our Spanish-speaking groups through the DLAC, the District English Learner Advisory Committee. We did outreach through them so that they could also help us get the word out to our Spanish-speaking families. And Ms. Valbuena Leon actually joined us, and we offered for the community forums that we held on October 1st and October 5th, we offered real-time Spanish interpretation for both of those events. And we had several families who called in and received that service as well. Next slide. So the reopening, I keep calling it a waiver because that's where technically that's where we are anytime we're in the purple. Once we move to red, then it would just be a reopening plan. So I just want to clarify, as Dr. Noguchi mentioned. So the particular document that's on the website is divided into 5 different sections. It's quite a lengthy document because there is a lot of detail that needs to be gone into and invested as far as the reopening plan, the protocols that would be in place, and essentially the process that the district would go through in order to safely reopen our TK through 6 schools. So what we're going to do the next several slides, my other cabinet member colleagues are going to weigh in, and they're going to give you a very high level overview. And like I said, at the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to entertain any of the board's questions or feedback. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brad Godot, and he's going to go over the in-person learning model, an example, as well as an example of how the phased-in approach would work. Mr. Godot?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Noonan. Good evening, Board President Marks, trustees, and Superintendent Dr. Noguchi. My pleasure to be here this evening. When we communicated the information out to our staff and community via our website a few weeks ago, an example of an in-person learning model that we presented to all for their input was this idea of cohorting students. So the example that you're looking at now has 2 cohorts, a group A and a group B. This model is an alternating day. So for example, group A students would attend school on Monday and Thursday for in-person instruction. Students in cohort B would be at home on Monday and Thursday doing independent learning. Conversely, on Tuesdays and Fridays, the cohort B group would have in-person instruction at school, and the other half of the students in group A would be at home. On Wednesday, all students would be home getting online virtual learning or distance learning. So again, talking through the idea that we would be cohorting students and phasing students slowly back in. What we've been discussing as an example would be that we would start with TK through 2nd grade students, including our preschoolers, for that first phase of in-person learning. So thinking back to that model of a hybrid schedule, we would start that with TK through 2. And then after a few weeks, whether that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what have you, then if the data holds and things are looking good, then we would continue in with the next phase, which would be to bring back, for example, students in grades 3 through 4, then again, pause, wait, and then bring back grades 5, 6 a few weeks after that. So you may ask yourself, okay, well, when we bring back TK2 students, what are the students in grades 3 through 6 doing? Well, those students would still be maintaining their distance learning structure as we have it now. So until there was a change for bringing them back, they would continue in the distance learning model. So looking at the different learning models, again, important to note that the example that I shared previously 2 slides ago is just an example of what might take place. We are looking at the feedback, or we've looked at the feedback from staff and from community. We're also working with Modesto Teachers Association and CSEA around what is the most, the viable hybrid schedule that would work. There's a lot of considerations to take into place, and obviously getting the input from the board is part of that process as well. Important to note here is that the conversations we're having about reopening schools are strictly around TK6 in this presentation. We are not currently looking at 712 at this time, although when our county gets into the red, as Dr. Noguchi and Ms. Noonan pointed out, when we get into the red, it's a little bit of a different process. But at this time, we're only permitted to look at the possibility of reopening TK6. Now, that isn't to say that we aren't planning. There is a lot of planning ongoing, but right now we're focused on the TK6 reopening. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Associate Superintendent of Student Support Services, Mr. Mark Herbst.
Thank you, Associate Superintendent Godot. Good evening, Board President Marks and Board of Trustees. The TK6 plan addresses a number of preventative strategies that includes physical distancing, hygiene measures, it outlines our cleaning and disinfecting procedures, provide training to our staff and families about expectations, and address additional safety measures for teachers and staff. Mr. Godot, if you could please go to the next slide. The document contains general social distancing guidelines, which include 6 feet to the greatest extent possible. The plan also addresses the entrance and the exit of the school facilities, which will include the routes the students take when they navigate our elementary campuses. Additionally, there are expectations regarding riding our school buses. When riding our buses, students will be required to wear face coverings. The plan also includes the use of small, stable cohorts in the classroom and at the school site. This encourages reducing the amount our students interact with one another by placing them in cohorts. The document also addresses distancing in non-classroom settings, such as recess and any extracurricular activities and school events. Mr. Godot, the next slide. The section on hygiene addresses the routines for hand washing and sanitizing. Additionally, the document addresses our desire to limit the amount of sharing of supplies that occurs, especially at the elementary level. The section on hygiene also addresses face coverings. You'll see in our proposal or in our plan that face coverings in grades TK through 2 are strongly recommended. In grades 3 through 6, they are required. All adults on campus will be required to wear face coverings. Clearly, there are students with disabilities who, by nature of their disability, cannot wear a face covering. Those will be the exceptions and will be made on a case-by-case basis. Students will also be able to bring their own face coverings, but even in those in a situation to where a student may forget, we will have plenty of face coverings on site for our students to use. And for that, I'd like to turn it over to Associate Superintendent Tim Zierle, who will talk about the next section.
Thank you, Mr. Herbst. Good evening again, trustees. Continuing with our district's prevention strategies, I will highlight cleaning and disinfection and additional health and safety measures. All sites will be cleaned thoroughly each day or daily, with deep cleaning being performed every Wednesday. Protective barriers, which could be desk shields, have been installed or will be installed once students return. And then ventilation and opening windows and doors will be encouraged when the outdoor air temperature or air quality allows. Next slide. Health screenings for students and staff. Contact-less thermometers will be used regularly on a daily basis before coming to school. Parents, students, and staff need to self-conduct and do a COVID-19 symptom screening. And we're asking them, do not come to school if you have a temperature above 100.4 degrees, if you're experiencing a cough, shortness of breath, or any other respiratory illness. Next screen. COVID testing of students and staff. Modesto City Schools is currently working to secure COVID test availability for our staff. Parents of symptomatic students will be contacted and testing will be recommended. And Modesto City Schools does not offer or conduct COVID testing for our students. Now I want to introduce Mike Henderson, Associate Superintendent of Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Zierle. So next is what happens when we do have COVID cases. In a case where an individual has potential exposure and they seek to have a test done and the test result is negative, that individual stays home for 24 hours. That duration of time, along with a negative test result, are sufficient prior to returning to the work site. In cases when we have a test result that's positive, the timeline is that the individual can return to school campus 10 days after the symptoms first appeared and at least 24 hours without symptoms. So no fever and the symptoms have improved. We continue to collaborate closely with the Department of Health, who give us ongoing guidance related to specific cases and quarantining and contact tracing. Next slide. Related to contact tracing, what do we do when we do have a process? We have a team of folks who, when a manager is informed of a potential exposure, they complete a reportable incident form. It goes to this team of folks who then explore quickly what the situation was and the circumstances, and determine who has had close contact with an individual who's been deemed to have positive case. And it's important to note that close contact is defined as being within 6 feet for a period of 15 or more minutes, or having direct physical contact with an individual who's symptomatic or positive. We continue to work closely, as mentioned, with public health. Our team coordinates with them, shares information, and determines what steps need to be taken as it relates to additional tracing and quarantining of our staff. In all those cases, we reiterate and maintain confidentiality regarding COVID diagnoses and results. Next up, we'll describe when to close a class or school, and Ms. Noonan will describe that process.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. So it's very critical to note that in any case of closure or positive COVID cases, we are in very close contact with public health, and our lead school nurse, Aurora Licadini, she is a subject matter expert in this. So we work with public health in consultation, and the district can also make the decision of when to close a class, when to close a school. The school closure takes place when there have been perhaps multiple cohorts of students, which a cohort is a small group of students that perhaps have a COVID positive case, or if staff as well, and if it equals about 5% of the overall student and staff population, that's when a school would close. The district closure, that happens if we were to reach 25% or more of school population, both staff and students, who are diagnosed COVID positive, then that's when the consideration would be taken to close the entire district and shift back to distance learning. So if a closure does happen, the sites are closed for 14 days, and that time period allows for Mr. Zierle's team to go in and to do a deep cleaning and sanitization of the sites, and to really give it that time for the COVID gestation period to end, and the quarantines take place. But again, all of that is done in conjunction with the public health department. Next slide. So next up, I'm going to go through the survey feedback. This gives you a broad overview of the amount of responses. And just keep in mind, so our TK through 6 student population is close to 11,000 students. So while 1,530 responses may seem like a low number, statistically speaking, that's roughly a little over 10% of our elementary school population. And when you're talking surveys, I mean, you're happy if you get 2 to 3% responses. So I do want to give you that information. The 7 through 12 parents who responded, we had 850, and mind you, that's a little lower because at this time it was optional for them to complete this survey, because this survey was specifically asking about TK through 6, but we did say if we were able to apply this to 7 through 12, what would work for your student. And then the staff responses, the district has close to 5,000 staff. We saw 1,556 responses, 902 of those from our certificated staff, and classified and management represented 654. So now I'm actually going to go through the process. If you could go to the next slide. Now I'm going to break it down. These next slides are going to be data heavy, but I think it's really important to be transparent with our data and to provide you with this information. All of this information will be posted to the website as well. We're looking at doing that by this Wednesday, so we can also post all of the comments. The people who completed the survey also provided a robust amount of comments, so we want to get those published as well. So for our TK through 6 parents, the English-speaking parents, we had a little over 1,200 responses. And as you can see on the right side, the question said, if Modesto City Schools is able to safely transition back to in-person learning, would you send your student back to the school site in a hybrid learning model? So each of the parent slides are going to have that data in the same part or the same placement on the slide. So in this case, the TK through 6 English speaking parents, it was roughly almost 63% said, yes, I would send my student back to a hybrid model, which as presented to them was similarly to what Mr. Godot said, with 2 alternating days on campus and 3 days of independent learning at home. And it was roughly 37% who said, no, I want my child to continue 100% distance learning. So that's what those 2 bars represent. Next slide. Now, what's very interesting is with our Spanish-speaking population, their numbers, and even you'll see it for 7 through 12, their numbers are almost 50-50. Actually, in 7 through 12, it is 50-50. So, and keep in mind that with our Spanish-speaking population, they've had a very high occurrence rate of COVID-19 in their communities. And I can see why perhaps they're a little bit more hesitant to send their child back. So in this case, for TK through 6, it was just a little over, it was almost 52%, so a little over 51%. Who said, yes, I would send my child back for the 2-day and 3-day. And then roughly 48% said, no, I would like my child to keep 100% distance learning. Next slide. So then we have our responses from our English-speaking 7 through 12 parents. There were roughly 782 responses. And in this case, the 7 through 12 parents, and you can see on the left the breakdown of the grade levels, almost 67% are saying yes, they would be interested in sending their child back. And it was also presented to them a 2-day, 3-day type of schedule with the 2 alternating full days and then the 3 days of independent learning at home. And as you can see, it was a little over 33% who said that they would like their child to continue to do 100% distance learning. And as I mentioned earlier, the next slide is the 7 through 12 Spanish-speaking parents. There were 68 responses, and it's exactly 50-50. As you can see, it's split right down the middle as far as if they would send their child back or if they would prefer that their child continue to do 100% distance learning. So the next several slides are going to go into our certificated staff. This slide, it's a lot of data, and I'll explain how the staff slides are set up. This slide presents all 902 responses for our certificated staff, and then the following slides, which I'll get to, are going to break it down by each area of the grade span. So for example, on the left, the question was, if Modesto City Schools is able to safely transition back to in-person learning, it will be expected that staff return to their school site/work location. Is there a reason you will not be able to return? And as you can see, close to 73% said, no, I do plan on returning in person. It's probably a lot of them in their comments were saying, you know, I'm already on site. I'm already here. So they're already planning on returning in person. And the other categories, the blue bar, the 6.43%, that's the employees who indicated, yes, I will not be able to return because I'm in a medical high risk category. The one directly below it was 9.42% of certificated staff said, yes, I will not be able to return due to childcare issues. And 11.2% of our certificated staff said, yes, I will not be able to return due to health and safety concerns surrounding COVID. So that gives you a good breakdown of where they're positioned. And then on the right side of the slide, we asked our certificated staff if they support having students in a hybrid model with 2 days on campus and 3 days at home learning. And as you can see, the total was 47, it was a little over 47% said, yes, I think it would work for our students. a little over almost 36.5% said, no, I think students should continue 100% distance learning. And then we had on each grade level, you'll see we had a significant portion who said other, and that's where they would provide further details. And just to give you an idea, some of the details that were provided there were concerns about childcare. There were concerns about if you're going to be offering a schedule that either choose for the kids to come back full time and then have those who want to continue distance learning continue that way instead of doing the hybrid setup. There were also concerns from teachers about providing both in-person and online instruction. And other certificated staff said if students can't come back every day, they would prefer a Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday cohort schedule rather than the alternating days of, say, Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday. So that was some of the high-level responses that were brought up in that other category. So next slide. The next slide shows you our early childhood education teachers. There were 39 out of 902 certificated staff who represent the early childhood education population. And as you can see, many of them are already back. So almost 77% said yes, they're planning on returning in person. And a little over 64% of our ECE teachers said yes, they think that the hybrid model would work. Or almost 31% said no, they feel that students should continue 100% distance learning. The next slide goes into the TK through 6 teachers, which was a little over half of the 902 responses, so 459 certificated staff from the TK through 6 levels. So we had 71.24% who said that they do plan on returning. As you can see, their health and safety concerns about COVID are a little higher, and their childcare concerns are a little higher as well for this population. And you can see this is a very stark difference in terms of do they support the hybrid setup. So roughly 41% said yes, they do, but roughly 38% said no, they feel that students should continue 100% distance learning. And a lot of the other comments, that's representing almost 21%, that's going towards what I had just said with the comments that I shared earlier. A lot of those were the TK through 6 teachers. The next slide, I've broken it out on the junior high teachers, junior high and middle school. So that's 78 out of the 902 responses. As you can see, close to 77% are planning on returning in person. Then you see on the right side, 50% of the 78 teachers feel that the 2 days on campus, 3 days at home would work. 37.18% feel that we should stay 100% distance learning. And again, the other comments mirrored the concerns that were being expressed by the other teachers as well. And the final slide for certificated staff represents the high school teachers, 9 through 12. They represented 292 out of the 902 responses. Roughly 73% said yes, they plan on returning in person. And then on the right side, you see that a little over 51% said yes, they feel that the hybrid, the 2 days on campus, 3 days at home would work. And close to 36% said no, that they feel that students should continue 100% distance learning. Next slide. Then we've broken it down on classified and management staff. This group of staff represented 654 responses, and this represented almost 86% classified staff, and a little over 14% were management. So as you can see, close to 81% of the 654 staff are planning on returning in person. And we did still ask them the question about the hybrid learning model to get their thoughts as well. It's important that we hear all the voices and input that are out there. And out of the classified and management staff, 61% said yes, they feel it would work, and 28.29% said no, they feel that students should continue distance learning. So as you can see, a lot of the feedback, it's very aligned and it's very similar. And a lot of the comments as well, when you read those, you'll see that there are some people who feel that we should just reopen schools and bring the kids back. And then there are other people who definitely say, no, I want my child, or I want as an employee to continue doing distance learning. So the next slide goes through the timeline, and this is broad estimate of the timeline, because as I think we've all learned with COVID and the times that we're in, is things shift very quickly and there's a lot of unknowns out there. But what we do know is that we're presenting tonight, and then we're planning on presenting again on October 19th to the Board of Education. If we need to do a waiver, and this is if we have to do a waiver, we would plan on, if the board discusses it and makes a decision for us to move forward, we would plan on submitting the waiver to Public Health on October 20th. Again, that's only if we require a waiver. Then, pending Public Health approval, we would look at a phased-in reopening of TK through 6th grades, including preschool, targeting the week of November 2nd to start that initial TK through 2nd reopening. Again, these are all, as Dr. Noguchi, she described it earlier, these are squishy dates. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that, you know, we're kind of riding a wave right now, and we're also trying to work on if we can start to reopen 7 through 12. But again, there are a lot of logistics that go into that. And our number one priority is on the health and safety of both our students and our staff. So we are definitely focused on that. I think sometimes people think, oh, that's easy, just reopen them. But there are a lot of moving pieces and logistics at work that sometimes it's not clearly evident of everything that the district is going through in order to make this process work and to do what's best for all the audiences. So we do post regular updates to our website, social media, and obviously phone and email and text to our families and staff. So at this time, we will open it up to any questions and feedback from the board members. So I will turn it back over to you, President Marks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Noonan. And so right now what we'll do is we'll have some questions from the board, and then we'll receive some comments, because I know we have some comments from the public to read, and then we'll come back to the board for additional comments so that everyone can hear what the public has to say as well. So it looks like I have, let's see, I did not see who came up first, but I'm going to go with Trustee West. Welcome, Trustee West. It's great to have you. Glad you could join us now. So then
Thank you.
And then we'll go to Trustee Brown and then Trustee Newman. So Trustee West.
Thank you. This is exciting news, so I'm really pleased to hear about the progress that we're making. And I appreciate very, very much the hundreds, probably thousands of hours that went into preparing this reopening plan. So my hat's off to everyone who worked really hard at this. I have one comment and then a question. My comment is, we heard that people want to open schools full time, that some of the comments we heard, Ms. Noonan, were let's just open up completely. That's where a lot of people are heading. But my understanding is, because of logistics like spacing, we have to keep that 6-foot distance. And that's not our guidelines. Is that correct? Those are guidelines from the CDC that we have to maintain that distance. And right now, we're not able to open up completely full time because we don't have the space available to separate. Is that correct?
I'll turn that over to Brad.
Hi, good evening, trustees. Yes, Dr. West. So one of the requirements as we're looking at the waiver process is ensuring that we have the health and safety protocols being able to implement to the best of our ability, right? So we've pretty much gone with 6 feet as the social distancing standard at TK6. But to whether or not we could bring all students back 5 days a week, our approach has been that we want to take a cautious approach and a measured approach at bringing students back, and not feeling that it would be in a position with the information that we have right now to just say, hey, we're going to bring all students back 5 days a week. That's been the approach. I'd have to do a little bit more research to get specific around, is it a state requirement or a county requirement? But I could research and get you the specifics, but that hasn't been our approach to this work.
Okay, thank you. That was just my understanding that we really couldn't, even if we wanted to. I just thought that we had those requirements in place right now.
So Trustee West, let me add a little bit to that. So it is my understanding that we still have to abide by CDC's guidelines, and CDC guidelines is the 6 foot and social distancing. So I know you and I had a conversation about this just a bit ago, and we are aligned to both the CDC and our public health, although our public health has outlined 3 to 6 feet where possible, but we are working on the 6 foot moving forward.
Okay, that I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. And then just my only other comment is, there's so many people that we want to take care of and think about different needs. The Monday, Thursday, and Tuesday, Friday schedule to me is less conducive to helping parents who need to schedule work things and daycare things. I know some of the comments mentioned, can't we do a Monday, Tuesday, and a Thursday, Friday schedule? And to me, that makes more sense than staggered out. So unless there's something I'm not aware of why we need those extra days in between, just seems like a nightmare for scheduling for parents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trustee West. And now we'll move on to Trustee Brown.
Yes, a couple of quick questions. There was a model that showed A and B groups returning on different days. And one thing I'd like to just ask for clarification, A group, would that include an entire classroom of students, or are classes broken into A and B groups within the class?
Great question. Great question, Trustee Brown. So that would be, we would be splitting the classes into cohorts. So if we had a TK classroom of up to 24 students, we would have a maximum of 12 in one of those cohorts. How we would split those cohorts up would be a process that we would go through, getting input from parents, staff, and how we would do that. But yeah, you're spot on. My apologies for not pointing that out. But the idea would be splitting the classrooms at the classroom level, so no more than half would be attending on a day.
Okay, all right. And then another question about the survey results that we received. I'm curious, we have a certain percentage of our district that is participating in the Modesto Virtual Academy. We have both students and staff who are participating in that academy. Do we know what percentage of our respondees were parents or faculty members that are involved in the MVA program?
You know, Trustee Brown, I don't know if I can drill down to that, but I can definitely follow up with you to see if I can find that data. But I don't know that I can't recall off the top of my head if we made that a choice for the staff and the parents, but I will definitely follow up with you on that.
It just feels to me like if we had a large number of those parents who are actively involved in this process, participating, that's going to skew the negative numbers much higher. So I was just curious if we had any breakout of that.
I'll definitely check and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Newman.
All right. Thank you to Dr. Noguchi and your team for this incredible Herculean effort. It's really obvious with the plan and the survey and the meetings and the input we've gotten from the public that that we are really trying to figure out what to do here. There are no easy answers. There's nothing, knee-jerk reactions probably are not our best course at this point, and I appreciate the cautious and measured approach that we're taking. We're a large district, and and a very diverse district, as we see by the survey results. So I have some questions, detailed questions about the plan. So part of this, just I'll kind of explain my thinking on some of my concerns. Part of the success of this really depends on a level of trust between our parents and the district. And because they need to communicate with us if there's a positive test result with their child or there's COVID in their home. We need to have that trust, that mutual trust going on in order for this to work. And there's a, you know, on the page 27 of the plan, we say that if there's a positive test result, we would require parents and guardians and staff notify school administration immediately of the student or staff testing positive. Well, now staff, I'm not as concerned about that because we can negotiate that in our contract and MOUs. But for parents and guardians, what can we do to legally require that, and how do we intend to implement that statement?
Well, I think I could tackle that one.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, actually, a great question. The document insists that the parents work to inform us because they would be the ones who would be privy to that information first. But when we're back in session, a positive COVID case gets reported to public health. And even though public health is going to go into obviously they can't divulge true confidential information, say this individual, but they will alert us that we have a problem and that we have a problem within a classroom and ask that we begin contact tracing if they believe that that the COVID positive test could have rolled into our schools. So there would be I don't want to call it a seamless stopgap, Trustee Newman, but that piece does exist. Parents would obviously, it would be more helpful if we hear from the parents because oftentimes they're going to hear it first, but we do have a backup, so to speak, with public health. Okay, so we would be alerted because there's what's called HIPAA, which is the Health Privacy Act. And so, you know, each of us has that. And so a positive test result would likely be covered by that. But so the public health has figured out a way without violating HIPAA to notify us, hey, in a classroom at, you know, for example, at Sonoma Elementary, a first grade classroom, you may have a positive. Correct. That would be the way we'd know. Correct. We would not know by name of who that individual was, but that we had a student who tested positive, and then they may make recommendations, Trustee Newman, in terms of, hey, given through our contact tracing, we believe that you need to take this specific action. But yes, without the confidentiality of the individual, that's how it would work. What's the turnaround time can we anticipate on that? I mean, that's also a factor here. There's been a lot of delays that are so beyond what we can do. In terms of the test results coming back, that's outside of our control. That's and to some extent outside of public health control as well. But once they get the information, what would be the turnaround we could expect from public health? Tough to tell. I know. I hear what you're saying, and I know that there's been, we'll say, frustrations. I think that the system has definitely been taxed. On the flip end of it, I know that we've got a great relationship with Nurse Chairperson Aurora Liquidini and has been able to get timely information from public health. So it would be difficult for me to say a for sure guarantee, but I would sure hope, considering the desire to keep schools open, that we would get stuff in an expeditious manner, no doubt about it. And is there a way we can enter into some sort of like written understanding with public health that within X amount of time, you'll inform us of these things? Like kind of a written expectation I just like this idea that we're kind of on our own here is disconcerting at best and upsetting. So, I mean, Trustee Newman, I love the idea. I will be happy to look into that. I do not know if public health would do such a thing, but I could definitely ask. Yeah, I mean, because that's going to be the issue, is timely information, and again, that trust. So our best
measure to protect our students is, again, their parents and their parents telling us. So there has to be that trust, and that's going to require effort at every person in the district at every level. And so, I want to make sure that that is our number one priority, trust. Okay, so the other issue is, and this is something for our older students as we move towards this, is there's nothing in our discipline policy if someone doesn't inform us of a positive test result and they come to school anyway, right?
Correct. There's nothing in there that would cover their notification of a positive test result. Correct.
Okay, so we can say require, but we don't have any teeth to that.
No.
Not a
recourse. Yeah, not a recourse in terms of anything disciplinary on that end. Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Okay. And then I think that. Okay, and then.
Mr. Herb, could you also talk about the staff testing that we are getting in contract with?
Yeah, we have just put the finishing touches, got the order signed, and have submitted the order for 2,500 saliva tests for our staff. That is still what that looks like in the rollout. We're still in conversation with Modesto Teachers Association, but we are pleased to have solidified an agreement. Again, can't say enough about her, with Aurora Licciardini working what I would consider her magic in terms of making sure that we at least have test availability for our staff should we need that once school's open.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. All right, so now I got to my other notes because there's a lot of paperwork here. All right, so my other questions are on the survey results. Okay. I want to back up Trustee Brown's comment that we need to delve into that. It's unfortunate these numbers may not reflect that, because if you're a parent or you're a teacher and you're sitting in an MVA, you're like, yeah, I'm going to stay doing this. This works. So that's probably what you answered. You answered no on that. So it may skew our no answers to the point where it isn't an accurate representation of students that are currently doing distance learning. And so what I want to delve into further would be the Spanish-speaking students or Spanish-speaking families. That number they're about 50-50. That number is concerning. So what is our plan with regard to that?
In terms of the Spanish families. So one thing I can tell you is that we are in the process of getting the comments that were submitted by the Spanish-speaking parents. We're in the process of getting those translated. So I think that will shed some additional light on where the parents are coming from, what is concerning them most. I'm curious if it's going to be similar to, in terms of some of the concerns that are being brought up to the English-speaking parents. But I can definitely get back to you once we get that information from Ms. Valbuena.
So, Mr. Godot, did you?
Yeah, Trustee Newman, I would add to that, as we're planning for the instructional models for when we bring students back at TK6, we are doing our very best to account for families that may not feel that it's in their best interest to send their students back for in-person learning. So, it's kind of a complicated puzzle when you're talking about staffing and staff that want to come back and families are going to come back and those things. But that is part of our planning process, is accounting for families. And we're not talking about the families that are already in MVA. We're talking about families that are currently in distance learning that are going to indicate, and we know that there will be some, right, that are going to say, you know what, we're not comfortable with sending our students back for in-person. What's the option? And so that is part of our conversation that we're having now.
Okay. And then I think Trustee West was delved into the hybrid model. If someone could tell me why, I think one of the benefits of the hybrid model, like what is, like, why would we be looking at that instead of just, I like the cleaning in the middle of the week. So you'd have your students there. Well, we probably can't have them all because of distancing. So that's a benefit. Never mind. Okay, so what are other districts doing? Is this effective? Is this hybrid modeling effective? If we know.
Well, I would say that we don't have a lot of data. We have some. We know that some districts are just starting the process. So we are communicating with local districts. We know Ceres and Turlock and others are starting to implement, and we want to learn from that experience, but we don't have hard data yet on exactly what that's looking like at the site level.
And I wanted to concur with Trustee West. I think the Monday, Tuesday, the 2 days on, and then the super cleaning. Because if you have Monday kids and you're kind of cleaning, and then you have Tuesday kids, you kind of shared the germs between the Monday and Tuesday kids. And so then, the Monday, Tuesday kids, and then you super clean, and then you have the Thursday, Friday kids. As a working parent, and as a parent who had a child who struggled with some health issues, we lived this. For 7 years. And so for me, knowing what I know about how to manage my son's health, Monday, Tuesday would have been better for me. That would have worked better. So, but I understand that that's a gap for the teachers and doesn't allow them a lot of recovery time in terms of moving those students along. So that might create an issue, but I do think in terms of just keeping kids healthy and stopping the spread, it's better. So we're going to need to weigh that and get input from our bargaining unit. I see they weren't super excited about hybrid in TK through 6, and a lot of the comments we're going to hear later are also an indication they weren't super excited about that. Does the idea of 2 days in a row with the same students, then you have a day off, and then you have the other grouping of students work better? So Dr. Noguchi.
So, this has been an evolving project since the spring. And back in the spring, when we first started looking at hybrid models, and actually what we shared with you, I believe in May or June, with some different options. And really what we were concerned back then was the social emotional health of our students, and we couldn't foresee how our kids could possibly do what they currently are doing. And so the thought being, rather than having, if we did it Monday, Tuesday, it's a whole 5 days before they came back. So we tried to break it up so they would see their teachers in different times during the week. But again, that was so last April and May, and now we really have transitioned. And I agree with you, looking to get further information from Krista when she said that the parents' comments, but also Teachers Association as well. It really is just evolved, and it's just one of the models. I know Turlock started out that way on a Monday, Thursday, I think, and now they're doing a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So it's just evolving as we learn more and we explore other options that we have.
Yeah, and I can tell you, if I may add, that was in the comments, we did see that as a theme, that if the students cannot come back every day, that parents did prefer the Monday, Tuesday, then the Wednesday gap, and then the Thursday, Friday. They preferred back-to-back days.
And as a working parent who I can work some at home, that would be better for me, because then I'd bring 2 days worth of work home, and I could get more done. And then you go back to work, and you can work easier. So I think it works with working parents better as well. But we do need to check in with our certificated staff, because it looks like to me that that's a rub here. Thank you guys for answering all my really hard questions. I still have more issues that I keep coming up with, because this is really convoluted. And as a lawyer, I want to write all these policies, and this is what I'm really struggling with, is that there's not, it's a lot of trust, and there's not a lot written down. Like, this is what you're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And there's a lot of play here. And because we don't know, it's a fluid situation. And so I'm struggling with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Newman. Trustee Brown?
Yes, one last follow-up question on the MVA situation. Do we know how many of our Spanish-speaking families are participating in the Modesto Virtual Academy right now?
Trustee Brown, I don't know off the top of my head, but give me a minute and I'll see if I can get that number for you.
Thank you.
Okay, and Trustee Irvin, I don't see you, but Trustee Irvin, do you have any comments or any questions right now?
You know, I'm just like Trustee Newman, you know, this fluid situation, I don't know, you know, I know my daughter wants to go back, you know, and then I'm like, you know, I'm on the fence right now. It's just, you know, this uncertainty around here, you know, you take that parent role, you know, you like, you know, I protect my baby, don't send, you know, but at the same token, you know, you have, you know, you think, you know, being back in class and with the protocols in place would be beneficial to a lot of students, you know. And I know a lot of students feel they're missing out, especially those in high school. You know, I just feel for them because their high school years, you know, is going to be one marked with asterisks, you know, when it comes time for reunions and things like that down the road. It's just how do we mitigate this with some certainty? And there's just not, you know. So that's kind of where I am. I'm confident in our ability as a district to put in the protocols in place, and you know, the staff to be able to carry out those protocols in a way that's, you know, puts safety first for our staff, our students, and everyone. You know, just like any parent, you always go with a little trepidation towards, you know, moving in that direction right now. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Trustee Irvin. So I had a few questions. So here's my questions. I wanted to know on the right now, so the waiver would mean we can only have 14 students in I want to call them a pod, a hub, and then and 2 adults. But if we go to red, is it the same criteria? Is it still 14 to 2?
The hubs, Board President Marks, the hub guidance is a completely separate guidance. So the waiver, yeah, so the 14 max with the 2 staff only exists when we're talking about learning hubs, not when we're talking about the waiver.
So if we're talking about a waiver, how many students would we, if we potentially could, how many students can we put in a classroom? 6 feet apart.
Mr. Godot, Associate Superintendent Godot, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We have done quite a bit of looking at our elementary classrooms. And if you cut those elementary classrooms in half, we are confident that the overwhelming majority can take half of those kids. And Mr. Godot, correct me if I'm wrong, still respect social distancing.
Yeah, so at TK3, the class size max is 24. Plus or minus 1 or so. And then for grades 4 through 6, I believe it's 34. So even at looking at grades 4 through 6, half of that at 17 per class, we would be able to, for the most part. Now, I mean, you know, we're a large district with a lot of facilities, so there may be some classrooms where we have challenges with getting up to 17 students socially distanced. But we also recognize that not every classroom is at the class size max. Not every classroom will have every student wanting to come back for in-person learning. So there, again, that this is like a Sudoku puzzle, right? Like, you do something here and it impacts over here. So, getting the numbers for the students that want to come back, identifying the instructional model specifics, or all of these things kind of are interwoven that would dictate what we can and can't do. But I guess the simple answer is yes, we believe that we can accommodate half the class size max at our TK6 classrooms with social distancing.
Right. Okay, so I'm just believing that we have about a third of our parents did not want to send their students to school. So that would be a third of our students, which would be 10,000 students. So we'd need 20,000 students in a classroom. So that would be, I want to say 200 classrooms. Did I do that right?
Well, you're...
No,
half.
2,000 classrooms, sorry. And so, yeah, you'd put it in half, right? You'd cut them down to half, but half. So right now, let's just say you would say half, but if we took off the third, then we just have that extra small amount of students that didn't make it in the classroom. So I didn't calculate that math, but so I'm just trying to look at what I consider as something that might be helpful. Was I really liked that some of the teachers said that they wanted to do the schedule full-time. So I'm trying to look at full-time, if you did full-time for half the students, and then that third would be staying home, and then you'd need to find a space for that other pocket of students that didn't quite fit in that model. And so, because I believe that if we had the students in class that need to be in class, that parents agree to that and it's safe, we have them 6 feet apart and the teachers are there, those students will be learning in the way that the parents agree to and the students agree to. Because right now, the parents that I'm talking to and the families, I'm just going to use the word, they're suffering. They're going through grave difficulties at home. Their students are not functioning we'll call it, in a high level capacity right now because they are in such a lonely, I'm going to call them lonely state. They're in a lonely state. And so they're not able to interact with their friends. They're not able to play, be in a place where they can do normal activities and be able to be, we'll call it, their minds are stimulated and they're in an environment that's very stimulating rather than looking at a screen for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day, however many hours they're sitting in front of this. So I'm just looking at that. Now, some students, that's great. They're able to do that. The parents are there. They're able to manage that time and they like that. But that is only a third of our parents and about a third of our teachers that are willing to stick with the one place. So I'm just trying to look at how could we do that? And then I talked about this before. When we had too many students for our classrooms and we went through this huge growth in our district at one time, and we grew thousands of students. So what we did is we went to multi-track year round, and that gave us 1/3 more on our campuses. So we did 3 months on, 1 month off, 3 months on, 1 month off. And I'm telling you, the families that were doing that loved it. So they wanted it even in different schools that we didn't have. We just didn't do it there, but they wanted it still because it created an environment that they liked. The length of time, there's not a huge gap like summer. So I'm just thinking outside the box and outside some of what we normally have done to see, is there a way that we can look at doing things differently to expand the amount of students that could be in the classroom, which is what our parents would like to do. And I know the timing of this is going to be critical because we're watching the numbers in our county. We're going from purple to red shortly. And then can we get these students back in school? So I just want to see, have you guys even thought about this? that you're
So-
multi-track
So,
around.
let
Okay.
me, President Mark, you've said a lot there, and
I
many of
did.
the same questions, and it's good. And that's why we're here. It's a special board meeting, it's a workshop, so we can have open, honest dialogue about opening schools. There is no one in this room or no one that is listening that doesn't want our kids back to school with their teachers, with their peers, doing dances, doing sports, doing all of that. We're in a pandemic, as we all know. Right now for teachers, they're doing the absolute best that they can. Same with the parents and same with the students, right? If we were to upend the entire structure and do a completely different master schedule, let's say at the end of January at that semester, at a high school, you have a master schedule. You can't peel out that one math teacher in 3 different methods. Now, is there a way of thinking outside the box? I think that's what we are working towards. We will continue to work towards, really for 2 things. One, ensuring health and safety protocols are there. I'm not comfortable giving a recommendation, and you all could overturn my recommendation. I'm not comfortable giving a recommendation where we'll have any kids in a classroom that's not 6 feet apart. Now, if there's a case where that is the case, because there's no other constraints, then we will have, sneeze guards and these other mitigating protocols in place. If we find ourselves in the spring in the same place that we are now, we certainly can think through what you're talking about by that year-round model. I worked in Elk Grove and they were year-round for years and years, and you can add a third more kids. So that could be something that we could explore if we find ourselves in the spring looking like we're going to be doing this hybrid the next year. I absolutely think that is something that we could explore and look to. I wish there was a way to make everybody happy. I really do. Kids, parents, teachers, our community, it just isn't there. There's going to be some people that are unhappy and there's going to be some people that are happy. So what I would recommend, and we're going to bring this back to you on Monday, I really like some of the data dives that you guys are asking for, because I think that's very valuable. But I'm going to recommend a hybrid fashion. At least we can start with something, because our kids haven't been in school for 6 months. Let's start with that, see what happens with the infection rate, see what happens in the winter, right? And then by that end of that semester, if there's some other tweaks that we can do to get more kids, then I'm absolutely 100% all for it, if we can show that we can do that. But to start out that way from the beginning, I think we have to, I'm just going to be very cautious. But it's really good dialogue and really good questions. It's the same questions that the whole team keeps asking. We ask one set of questions one week, and then and we work through it for 15 hours, and then those questions are no longer valid, and we're on to another set of questions. But they're all good, and we're just learning more and more, and we're going to get to a place where we will figure this out, and we'll figure it out together.
Right. I agree. Thank you. Thank you for your response and your patience with my outside the box thinking.
They're good. They're absolutely valid. It's exactly what teachers are asking and parents are asking too.
Yeah. Okay.
Trustee West?
I have Trustee West. Yes.
Thank you. Kind of along what Trustee President Marks is talking about, I've heard the same comments. I hear the parents who are suffering. I as well want to come back as much as we can, as soon as we can, but I also understand the constraints. One thing we haven't discussed at length, I know I had talked to Dr. Noguchi briefly about it, and I think there might be a reason why we can't do this, but teachers don't want to have a lot of preps. They've got to do distance learning and in-class learning, and I feel like they're overwhelmed as well. And so one thing that we haven't talked about would be doing an AM group and a PM group, similar to kindergarten. We have morning kindergartners and afternoon kindergartners. I think busing is going to be a big sticking point for that. How do we get our kids all bused and all the schedules worked? But the teachers then would have one prep. So they teach half their class in the morning, same thing in the afternoon. They don't have to do all the online things. I don't know if we have time for cleaning, deep cleaning in between the two sessions, but that's one idea. Has that been discussed? I'm sure it has, but what have you guys found on that?
Yeah, so Trustee Dr. West, we actually did consider the AM/PM hybrid model. It was one of the first models that we were really kind of looking deeply at. And the further we got into that model, the logistics of implementing that on the transportation side, on the meal service, transitioning large group of students during a constrained amount of time midday, with bringing students onto the campus, getting them meal service while we're getting meal service for students, and then having them leave and doing the cleaning between the groups. It was logistically one of the more challenging models to go with. So we actually did move away from that as a primary option. But we are, these are great questions. These are the questions that we've all been grappling with. I can say that we've spent a great deal of time over the last week and a half with our colleagues, Modesto Teachers Association, trying to identify all of these nuances and how we can best support students' instruction, teachers. Our teachers are under a considerable amount of stress and wanting to do their very best for students, knowing the need out there. So we're trying to identify that, what is going to be not just the best model for students and for families, but also how can we best support the teachers that are implementing this in the classroom.
I agree. Thank you for the feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I have relatives that are teachers, and it has been extremely difficult. And just trying to do both and trying to figure out, all the, in the spring was all new technology, and now it's very difficult to teach a class on a screen and not be with the students and interacting with them. So I appreciate all the teachers that are building relationships and working hard towards that. And I know our district has done a phenomenal job on building relationships. So I appreciate all that that's going into that. Now, Mr. Godot.
Yes, I do. Trustee Brown, just to follow back up on the question you asked about how many English learners we had in Modesto Virtual Academy. We have 5 TK6 English learners, 32 at grades 7-8, and 14 at grades 9-12. So about 51 total in TK 12. Now that data is a couple of weeks old, but that was after we stopped our enrollment process, or our, shifting students into the MBA program. So I'm fairly confident that's plus or minus a few English learner students.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that data. And now I believe we are ready for Ms. Noonan to share some of the public comments, and then we'll come back to the board for any further comments and
Sure.
see where we're going from here. All right, Trustee Noonan. Sorry.
I'm a trustee now.
Sorry, I've been on a trip and it's like 10:30.
No worries.
So I'm just
It's
like,
okay.
all right, this is trying to class up in here. All right, thank you, Ms.
It's
Noonan.
all good. So we have several, so bear with me, and all the comments all relate to this item. So I will read through them. The first one comes from I believe it's the Nuding family. They are a parent, and their comment is, "This distance learning has got to stop. These kids need to be back on campus and in the classrooms. My child, as well as many others, are struggling with depression and hopelessness. They need their friends, sports, and teachers to support and encourage them. My son spends more time trying to battle technology issues to get into class, and then again to get assignments that he has completed turned in, than he actually does any learning anything. He spends more time trying to email his teachers about why he still has a 0 for an assignment that he's turned in than he does actually doing the assignments. I'm still getting a couple of calls weekly that he's being marked absent from classes he's in. This is not working. Please put these kids back on campus where they belong. Thank you." The next comment comes from Epi Chung, a 4th grade teacher at Everett Elementary. And the comment is, my name is Epi Chung. I teach 4th grade at Everett Elementary. Contrary to public opinion, distance learning did not make my job easier. I am working harder than I ever have before. But thanks to my colleagues, administrators, and support staff, and thanks to the professional developments offered by Modesto City Schools, I have had some successes each day. I have forged positive relationships with the guardians of the students in my class. I have had the highest percentage of parent communication than I've had at this point in the school year. Excluding back to school night, I have had a personal phone call, message exchange, and/or video conference with 85% of my families. I have learned new teaching apps in order to make distance learning successful. These apps have always been at my disposal, such as Schoology, Nearpod, Google Docs, etc., but I have never felt the need to use them regularly. When we return to in-person classes, I will continue utilizing them. My designated ELD instruction time has never run so smoothly. I can pull my ELs and work with them in a small group uninterrupted. I can pull my emerging learners in an even smaller group uninterrupted. If you have ever been in an elementary classroom, you understand the rarity of uninterrupted small group instruction. Board members, if you have not visited an elementary distance learning classroom, I urge you to do so. Come see our challenges, but also come observe our successes, particularly now since you will be deciding when and how we reopen. The next comment is from, I hope I say her name correctly, Gina Gurgic, a 6th grade GATE teacher at Sonoma Elementary, as well as a parent. I am an MCS teacher and MCS parent for a 4th and 8th grader. The distance learning model is not ideal, but it is working. The students in my class are attending, doing their work, and we are in a groove. My own children at home alone all day are doing the same. I do not think the hybrid model will improve anything. If it is safe to bring students back, then bring them back 100%. Bring them back slowly, starting with the youngest grades. If it is not safe, then we shouldn't bring students back. Why add more stress to our staff and students by making everyone learn and adjust to a new model? A teacher stuck behind a desk 6 feet away is simply another version of distance learning. Teachers are not babysitters. The hybrid model is distance learning with babysitting. If you want us to teach, then bring the kids back 100% when it is safe. Signed, Gina Gurgitz, 6th grade GATE at Sonoma Elementary. The next comment actually starts with a series of bullets. It's from a gentleman named Bob Forez. The first bullet says, no, I didn't, okay, sorry. The first bullet says, remote learning results in severe learning loss and increased social isolation. It breeds child and adolescent physical and sexual abuse, substance abuse, depression, and suicidal ideation. Such impacts are visited more severely on Black and Brown children, low-income children, and those with learning disabilities. Children are far less likely to spread COVID than others. Only 100 children in the US have died from COVID, which is less than the flu. Children are more likely to die from homicides, drownings, and burns. The long-term effects of continued remote learning to our children will be devastating. I know that the district must comply with a gazillion rules, but your agenda materials are so lengthy, over 70 pages, as to be difficult for the general public to digest in a short period of time. In the end, just keep it simple. Sincerely, Bob Forrest. The next comment, I only have a last name of Vincent, who is a teacher, and they say, I am an MCS teacher. The distance learning model is not ideal. However, teachers and families are doing it successfully, also safely. We do not have many weeks left before winter break. Why wouldn't MCS wait until January to reopen fully? My students and families have adjusted to distance learning and are successful. We should not interrupt that with haphazard hybrid learning. With a hybrid model, teachers and families will be disrupted in numerous ways. Students would be asked to come for 2 days in person, do 3 days at home, and virtual learning in the middle. Teachers are now being asked to teach in person combined with simultaneous online and the virtual 1 day a week. That is asking us to plan for 3 teachings for everything we teach. Teaching in-person students from behind the plexiglass completely defeats the purpose of in-person instruction. Finally, our school site alone has had at least 5 COVID cases and the resulting quarantines. That happened with a smaller on-site staff and no students. Now we will have small children who do not have to wear masks. We will be inside. And to date, no PPE, otherwise known as personal protective equipment, has been offered from the district. Where is the protection for staff, for students, for families? Wait until we can open 100% 5 days a week. That is the best plan for everyone. And the next comment is from Mark and Summer Niskanen, I think is how you say their last name, and their parents. The comment is, my wife and I have 2 children in the Modesto City Schools district, grades 2 and 5. To say this year has been difficult would be a total understatement. Based on the research we have conducted, combined with recent news articles stating the data supports a full reopening of schools, my wife and I wholeheartedly believe the elementary schools within MCS can be opened with a normal schedule of 5 days per week. The 2 days per week and assignment of student groups actually makes it more difficult on students and parents alike, especially those with multiple children in various elementary school grades. Please consider a 5-day per week option. The student's mental and physical stability depends on a normal structured routine and education. We believe the negative effects the continued school closures has had on our children, and many children for that matter, far outweigh the risk of COVID-19. We are 100% in support of our children going back to school 5 days per week. Your consideration in this matter is appreciated. And it's signed Mark and Summer Niskanen. And the last comment is from Kim Resso. She's a Modesto City Schools employee. As an MCS employee, I am against returning to school until it is safe for everyone to return. Why am I concerned? I am concerned because at my school site, we have already had staff members test positive for COVID, and the district did not tell the staff. It was the staff members who shared the news with others out of respect for their fellow staff and their families. Then I have childcare issues. I also have a special needs adult at home with me. Her adult daycare program is not open. If we go back, I will have no one to care for her. I know I am not alone in the childcare issue. My next concern is with students. How will we address students that don't follow the healthcare guidelines? Finally, I am working really hard to teach my standards well online, and if we go hybrid, I am being asked to do twice as much. I don't believe I can do hybrid and in-class learning with rigor and mastery the district would like. We should not go back until it is safe for everyone. Thank you, Kim Resso. And that concludes the public comments that were submitted for this evening's meeting workshop.
Thank you. Thank you for reading those. Now we will see if there are any other comments from the board after hearing the comments from the public. Trustee Brown and then Trustee Newman.
I just want to say that it's refreshing to hear the comments from the public and put some real life perspective on all of the issues that we've been talking about tonight. And just want to remind everybody that what I'm hearing from staff, from my fellow board members, and from the parents is a deep concern for the well-being of all of our kids and all of our staff members. And we are listening. We are caring individuals who really want the best for everyone. And I trust and I'm grateful for the team that we have that is guiding these decisions, because I know who they are, I know what they stand for, and I know where their hearts are. And so thank you to everyone involved.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. Trustee Newman.
I just want to thank everyone that sent in a comment. Thank you for taking your time to do that. I appreciate the perspective that each you offered. Particularly, I think there were 4 comments from Sonoma people. So shout out to Sonoma. Thanks for representing. My comment is as pretty much as a parent watching some of this. As you know, my son is in his senior year, sitting in his underwear, going to high school. So as most of the other kids are too, especially the boys. So it's been an interesting exercise and I'm going to borrow this from Ms. Castellani as she was talking to her this week. She was talking about resilience. This is a resilience building time, and particularly for our high school students. This is about digging in and still meeting the standards and still trying to learn and still struggling through it. As those of us who are working, it's all about resilience too. It's about just, okay, I got to figure out how to do this. Okay, this is going to take longer. I've got it to my COVID contingencies have to be in place of, okay, this might not get here by this time, so I have to have these COVID contingencies. It's an exercise in resilience on all of us, and to borrow Ms. Gergich's words, it's not ideal, but it's working. The distance learning is again building this resilience in our students and in our community. So as we move forward, we're going to have to continue to build that resilience muscle. No matter if we open up completely or we open hybrid or we don't open at all, no matter what we do, this resilience muscle is still going to need to be working and building. And so I just want to, I keep warning, telling my 2 boys this as well. As we have college students, our California state universities are not going to be opening for in-person instruction based on the information they've dispersed at this time and that I have at this time for most of the year, the academic year. And so again, resilience. I think that another point was made by the teachers about disruption. And I think this is a really important point. And it's a concern that I've had, particularly for our high school students, that if we try and open before the end of this semester, there would be a disruption in this semester's academics. Because if we do a gradual opening, the earliest I could calendar that, it would be in December. And we have finals in December. So, I want to make sure that we consider disruption in terms of our high school students, because they need to get those credits. They need to get those tests. They need to get those grades. They have a lot riding on this. So I think disruption is something we need to take into consideration. And I think that's really important for our high school students. With regard to disruption of our TK through 6, I'm not seeing, the 2 days could be disruptive, but I do think that would allow them, the students that are really struggling with this, it would allow some in-person learning to addressing some of the issues that are maybe going on, and how we could, help those students through this time. So, the weighing the disruption versus the benefits, I think that the benefits outweigh that. But that's my 2 cents on the resilience, and so that's kind of a theme for this time. I don't want us lowering standards, academic standards. I think that it's really important that we keep encouraging our students to reach that bar, to meet that bar, and to exceed that bar. And so I don't think this is a time for to say, okay, it's too hard. I think that we need to encourage, to believe in our students' ability to meet it, that this resilience is there. I think there's some bright spots that are also shining in what's happening. I think there's students that this is an unbelievable time of learning that they're going through. I think there are those stories out there, and I think that we need to remember that. So I think there's a lot of freedom in this. I was talking to a mom who said, yeah, my daughter, she's just so focused on schoolwork. She's opened a little small business on the side. She's doing better than she's ever been doing. So I've been hearing different stories than Trustee Marks. I've also heard that, I know there are students struggling, but I think there are some students that are really thriving in this environment. And so I think we ought not to sell that short. So thank you for consideration of things. Again, as we move forward and for looking at opening our older grades, I would like to see what other districts are doing with regard to discipline policies, because I think at that point, then there is some student skin in the game that we need to have. So how we do that, TK through 6, I do not think we could do that, and I'm probably not for 7, 8. But for our high school students, we need to be thinking about what would be consequences for knowing you are infected. So I think that would be something we move forward and look at and at least talk about. All right, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Trustee Newman. I appreciate the comments that were sent in, and you could hear the stress from the teachers and the stress from the parents that sent letters in, and just some of the struggles they're both having in this time that we're living in. And I agree with the use the word resilience, which is a good word. That's the students who do well are resilient in life, and this has been testing that big time for a lot of children. And I liked also, I think Dr. Noguchi used the word pivot, pivoting and just working with what we know, because things keep changing. And that's been a very disconcerting for most of us, because it hasn't been, we know this, and then next week it changes. And then we go with new rules. Okay, now we just figured that one out. Now we have to go back to square one and try to figure it out again. So it is really difficult at this point, and I recognize the staff has put numerous hours and days and time, a lot of time in this to try to figure out, some options for us to consider and then to try to move forward. I look forward to hearing from how the teachers really would like this to look like, and the ones who are, I know some of the teachers that I know that are really wanting to be with their students. They really miss that interaction in the classroom, and seeing their faces in the classroom. So I know that that's going to be, important as we move forward. And then I'm wondering, can we also check with, so we had quite a number of private schools that started in our county. There's also been charter schools that have started in our county. So they have a little bit more time in the process and they're smaller than we are, and just to see where they are. And then there's some in the state. So I have a relative that's teaching in a charter school, junior high, and they started back a month ago. So I know there's some ideas and some ways to look at how are they teaching. And she has, I want to say, she's teaching 36 students at a time in her classroom. So in Northern California. So just to be able to say, there are schools that are opening, there's no COVID cases there, just trying to figure out how we can do it, because we do have a higher rate in our area, or at least our county. So I appreciate what you've said, what you're looking at, and just how we can move forward. Is going to be a good discussion at the next board meeting when we're going to make this decision. We're not voting tonight, but it's been good. I'm sorry that Trustee Lopez is not able to be with us tonight to be able to have his input too. Would have appreciated to hear that. So any other comments from board members before we close tonight's meeting? Seeing none, appreciate all of you. Thank you, staff, for your time tonight. Our tech staff that made this work tonight, looking out at them here in the boardroom, and they've done an awesome job. So appreciate that, helping all of you get on after our safety stuff kind of changed and tweaked our computers a little bit this week when we went to get back in. So thank you again, and I need a motion to close the meeting. Trustee Newman makes a motion to close the meeting. Do I have a second? Trustee West makes a second. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. aye. I'm hoping John's still there. All right. And Trustee Irvin, thank you for attending.
Aye.
And it is, okay, you said aye. Thank you. So it's 7:52. All right. Thank you very much, all of you. And tonight's meeting has completed. So we look forward to hearing from any other comments from parents and staff for our next meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.